Okay. All right, good afternoon. It is August 26th, and we're here welcoming Joan Zaleski from the League of Women Voters. It is a very different year. Joan and I talked about this yesterday, about how normally we would have a presentation like this in person, and she would be used to our students coming up to her and introducing themselves, maybe even greeting her outside and introducing themselves by name. And so we're slow rolling our beginning of school. We've got 40 students on campus now. We've got about 40 at home. And so we have, some teachers at home who may be watching, some teachers here on their computers. We've sort of figured out the protocol. The students know that if they want to ask a question from home, that they're going to press the participant button, raise hand piece. And if they want to ask a question here, Joan, they're going to raise their hand. A teacher and I will help keep track of that. And they'll walk up kind of like Cadence did, so you can see her on the screen. Joan is very interested in seeing the faces of all of you guys and seeing you. So in fact, right now, it would be great if you want to all queue up your video and we can turn it back off and we'll turn it back on when you ask a question. But Joan, would love to see you for this opening bit. You could turn your video on. That'd be great. So again, we're fortunate.
As I mentioned yesterday, I was a teacher for a long time. And so I'm used to, this is very different for me. So I really appreciate seeing your faces and hearing your questions.
Yeah, and Joan said this was going to be good practice because she's literally giving the same presentation tonight at the library.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it makes her feel good too. Joan, you moved down here a while ago.
Yeah, we've been here. We've been here for 6 years. Yep, love it.
Good.
Yep.
And you've spoken with us before in person, which we're grateful for.
Yep.
We're glad for your being here today. So everybody, Joan Zaleski from the League of Women Voters, turning it over to her now. It's her show. And
Okay.
thank you, Joan. We're excited.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see your faces, and you can log off your faces if you want to right now. As I said, this is the first time I've been teaching a class like this. So I'm hoping that you stay awake and that you stay with us. This is really an exciting day to be with you because we're celebrating Women's Equality Day today. And I know you saw Lady Gaga's video yesterday. And, we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but she was really telling the story about the suffragists who really fought right up to the very end to get the 19th Amendment passed. And there was a lot going on in that video, a lot of things that were very dramatic, and also had to do with the last state, Tennessee, ratifying the amendment. And you might have seen one of the legislators who opened up his coat pocket and he saw the note inside of his coat pocket from his mother who said to vote for it, and that was the winning vote. So it was quite dramatic right up to the end. But Women's Equality Day celebrates the passage of the 19th Amendment. So I'm happy to share this day with you. Let me put up on my screen here, share screen, okay. All righty. Everyone can see this, yes? I'm assuming yes? Okay. So today I want to talk about that history of how the 19th Amendment was ratified. It's a long history. It was not an easy history. In fact, the reason why we're celebrating it is it happened 100 years ago in 1920. And it seems hard to believe during this time when we have a woman running for vice president that women were left out of our Constitution, that there really was a time when women were not even allowed to vote. They were not counted as citizens. And so let's look back on how we got to the point where women gained the right to vote. We're going to begin very early on, even before the Constitution was passed. And I'm sure many of you know Abigail Adams. And this was the quote from a letter that she sent to her husband, John Adams, who was at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia writing our Constitution in 1776. And she said, remember the ladies. And you probably have heard this quote many times before, but you probably haven't read the rest of the quote. Remember the ladies and be more favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have not voice or representation. So here was our very earliest suffragists. And I know that I'm hoping you all know that the term suffragist means the people who were fighting for the right to vote. And Abigail Adams was not only wise in her words to her husband, but she was also back in Massachusetts running the family farm and business. And she was our second first lady, and she was the mother of our sixth president, John Quincy Adams. So she was quite an early leader in this fight for the right of women to vote. Well, despite Abigail Adams' words to her husband, the men in Philadelphia crafted a constitution that gave power to white men of wealth, excluding not only women, but also Native Americans and the enslaved Africans. And while there were some states that actually did give limited voting to women, once the Constitution took effect, women were not seen as full citizens, and they did not have full rights and privileges under our Constitution. So that revolution that Abigail Adams talked about, it began to take hold. And some of the early suffragists were right here in South Carolina. You might have heard of Angelina and Sarah Grimke, the sisters who lived here in Charleston. They grew up on a plantation in South Carolina. And they were early abolitionists as well as suffragists. And abolitionists were fighting to free the slaves. And it's not unusual that the early abolitionists were also early suffragists because like Angelina and Sarah Grimke, they grew up looking around them at the lack of rights of enslaved people. And they recognized that, like them, women under the law were considered property and had few rights of their own. So Angelina and Sarah Grimke were quite brave because this was not a time when women could speak out in public. It was also a very dangerous time, but they were very outspoken, speaking to large groups of people at churches and communities. And they spoke out in favor of abolition and the early suffragists. Now, they were invited to the Seneca Falls Conference. I'm going to tell you about that next, but here's a wonderful quote from Sarah Grimke. "I know nothing of man's rights or women's rights. Human rights are all that I recognize." So in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York, the suffragist Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott convened more than 300 men and women over a 2-day period to discuss the social, civil, religious conditions and rights of women. And this was a landmark convention that took place. What came out of that first convention, there were many other conventions that took place, but this was the first landmark convention that actually wrote up a declaration of sentiments. And in that, it was written by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and it was signed by 100 men and women. And one of the proclamations states, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." And I know you've heard something similar before from the Bill of Rights, and in the Declaration of Sentiments in 1848, they actually included women for the first time. Now that declaration solidified universal suffrage. Now that's what these early abolitionists and suffragists were fighting for. They were fighting for the rights of both the enslaved people and women. So universal suffrage was that first struggle that they had. And Frederick Douglass, the great orator Frederick Douglass, who signed the Declaration of Sentiments, was at this convention. He was a great proponent of universal suffrage, along with Susan B. Anthony. Now, for most of their lives, Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony were close friends and allies in their struggle for universal suffrage. They wanted to abolish slavery, and they wanted the vote for all. But with the abolishment of slavery after the Civil War, Susan B. Anthony saw the possibility of universal suffrage begin to evaporate because the 15th Amendment was passed right after the Civil War. And the 15th Amendment promised manhood suffrage instead. And Frederick Douglass had fought very hard for the 15th Amendment, and he insisted that it was the Black man's time, and he would not let it become entwined with the women's vote. So Susan B. Anthony insisted that the Negro male must not, quote, march to liberty over woman's prostrate form, and she spoke out against the 15th Amendment. Well, the passage of the 15th Amendment, because it did pass, dealt a powerful blow to women's rights. And the coalition really broke apart. Susan B. Anthony fought for a 16th Amendment that would give women the right to vote. But it would be another 75 years, 75 long years before the 19th Amendment, which some called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, to be ratified. And during those years, issues of race and gender, especially in southern states, complicated the suffrage movement. Anthony never got over women being left out of the 15th Amendment, and she died before the 19th Amendment was passed. Well, what about the Black suffragists? And there were many Black suffragists, but the Black women's suffrage movement and the white women's suffrage movement often took different paths. With the exception of Lottie Rollin up here on the upper right-hand corner, most of these brave Black women were born into slavery. Their accomplishments as writers and orators and abolitionists and teachers and organizers came from a deep sense of the inequalities that they faced as women and as Black women. Mary Church Terrell would organize the National Association of Colored Women, one of the early groups to work toward women's suffrage and equal rights. And Lottie Rollin, as I mentioned up here in the upper right-hand corner, she grew up in Charleston to freed parents. They opened a school to teach the newly freed slaves after the Civil War. And they were ardent suffragists who organized a women's rights convention in South Carolina in 1870, and it was attended by both Black and white suffragists. Lottie spoke on the floor of the South Carolina House of Representatives to plead for women's suffrage. But following the end of Reconstruction and the growth of the Jim Crow laws in the South, the fight for women's suffrage became not only complicated, but also dangerous. So it took a different path. However, the movement, as I said, broke apart, the women's suffrage movement, and there were two different parties. Carrie Chapman Catt was leader of the National American Women's Suffrage Association, who later founded the League of Women Voters. Alice Paul was the founder of the Women's Party. And each of these women approached suffrage from different angles. Carrie Chapman Catt was more moderate. She wanted to work for each state to ratify its own suffrage amendment. Probably a more pragmatic approach at that point. But Alice Paul had been involved in the suffrage movement in Britain, which was a much more aggressive and often violent movement in England. Women were arrested, women were beaten there. That was what she was used to. And she founded the Women's Party, which had a much more aggressive approach. She wanted a full constitutional amendment to give women citizenship and the right to vote. Notice that the behind her, she's noted for that flag. Every time a state ratified the 19th Amendment, she would sew a star on the flag. So she was known for that star. Well, while they took different approaches for the same purpose, there were lots of foot soldiers. And somebody else called them worker bees, who were out there from both parties, women who knocked on doors, they made speeches, they marched in the mud to get legislators to listen to them. They picketed. As you saw yesterday in the video, the women who picketed in front of the White House were arrested and sent to prison, and they had hunger strikes and they were force-fed. They protested in a way that became the model for civil disobedience later in our civil rights movement in the 20th century. So here it is, the 19th Amendment. It's 27 simple words. It was ratified by the 36th state, which was Tennessee, and you got a glimpse of that briefly in the video yesterday. But it's a very simple statement that the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged in the United States or any state on account of sex. It's a very simple document. The 3/5 of the state finally ratified it in August of 1920. You know, people will say today, well, who could possibly be against the simple 27-word statement? Well, there were vested interests. There were politicians, corporations, clergy, racists who were afraid of having Black women vote. They were called antis, A-N-T-I, the anti-suffragists, who feared that the women's vote would lead to moral decline in the nation. But Tennessee finally ratified it, and in case you're interested, South Carolina did not ratify the 19th Amendment until 1969. Now, that doesn't mean that the women in South Carolina didn't vote, because they were protected by this, amendment to the Constitution. Our South Carolina legislature had to ratify it, and they did not until 1969. So here is what our country looked like after the 19th Amendment was ratified. All of those yellow states were affected by the 19th Amendment. Women were able to vote. 26 million women were affected by the 19th Amendment. It's a frequent fallacy to think that there were women in the United States that didn't vote before that, because the blue states that you see there, women had full voting rights before the 19th Amendment were passed. The gray states, they had full voting rights even before they became a state. And then the green states, now you can see Tennessee right there, which was the last state to ratify. Tennessee, women could vote for president before the 19th Amendment. But in those yellow states, this was the first time that 26 million women across the country were able to vote that year. It wasn't a great turnout. In fact, people were disappointed that women didn't vote. It would take a while before women knew they could vote, before they could register to vote, and that was the job of the League of Women Voters, which was also organized that year. So the National American Women's Suffrage Association under Carrie Chapman Catt formed in, actually before the amendment was even ratified, in Valentine's Day, February 14th. And the League from the very beginning has been dedicated to educating voters, helping them register to vote, encouraging citizens to take an active part in the democracy. Carrie Chapman Catt was very aware of the fact that education, and educating women in particular, was going to be the critical force to get people to vote. And as we said before, the League is nonpartisan. We don't advocate for a political party or candidate, but we do advocate for issues. Now, what about Alice Paul? Well, Alice Paul went on from 1920 on. Alice Paul introduced something called the Equal Rights Amendment. Some of you might be aware of. The Equal Rights Amendment was introduced almost every congressional session since 1920. Not only give women the right to vote, but also give women equal rights in the workplace and at home legally. Now, as some of you might know, the Equal Rights Amendment finally did pass Congress in the 1970s and was sent to the states for its 3/5 ratification. And it has been ratified by 3/5 of the states. But it is, there are complications in terms of the time limit, and we're fighting to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed. And the League of Women Voters is very proudly a supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment, which is also a legacy from the suffrage movement. So, women power the vote. We stand on the shoulders of those women who came before us. Those courageous women throughout the centuries, really, who at great physical risk spoke out in favor of women's right to vote. Today, like them, we protect that right and we take it very seriously. And I want to leave you here of your counts, not just women, but your vote counts. And I want to just leave you with some of these thoughts, and then we'll take some questions. So what can you do to power the vote? First, register to vote when you turn 18. I have to say that when I was 18, I could not vote. I had to be 21 in order to vote. And I do remember the first time I voted. It was not as exciting as a presidential election. It was a local election. But I'm sorry, let me just turn this off. Sorry. But it's important that as soon as you turn 18, that you find a way to register to vote. You can register to vote online. That's your duty, responsibility. It's also your right to make your voice known. Secondly, we want to encourage you to work at the polls on election day. Young people, even if you're not registered to vote, can work at the polls. And I was saying yesterday that I have been working at the polls. Unfortunately, I will not be working this November because of the virus. I can't do that because my husband has a health condition and I don't want to bring the virus home to him. So as a result of many people not able to work at the polls, it means that polling places will be probably eliminated, condensed. And so it is critical if you can vote, if you can work on election day, to do that. And I'm going to get you that information so that you can do that. It would be wonderful to have a representation from your school there. Thirdly, you want to share the information with your parents about Vote 411. Vote 411 is the League's voter information hub. Everything is on vote411.org. You can find out how to register to vote. You can get your absentee ballot, and we are encouraging everyone to vote with an absentee ballot. You can check your registration if you're not sure whether you've registered or not. And it has a voter's guide. So there are lots of different ways that you can register to vote. I know that online. You can go to SC Votes or other apps. But Vote 411 is the only one that will give you information about the candidates who are on your ballot. So those are three things that you can do. Okay. I suspect that we probably have questions and some discussion at this point. So I'm going to stop my share and go back. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
I'm just going to sort of reiterate our rules here. We're going to bounce back and forth between at home and in person. And if you're in person, you're going to walk up here to my computer and I'm going to turn it. So you're going to address everyone at home and Joan. And we'll sort of go through. And let me switch to this view here.
Also, I hope you all got your stickers that say future voters. If not, I know you'll get them soon.
Yeah, so Ms. Duvall will be passing them out. And for our upper school students already here, we've passed out that voter registration information. And for upper schoolers at home, we'll share that as well. And the Vote 11 placard as well, too.
Great.
So we're doing great. All right, Amelia, let's go with your question for Joan, please. And turn on your video, please, and it'll be great.
Hi, Ms. Zaleski.
Hi, Amelia.
Thank you so much for coming today. Your presentation was super cool. I really enjoyed it.
Great, thank you.
And I was wondering what inspired you to join the League of Women Voters and speak on their behalf?
Okay, it's a great question. I love answering this question because it brings me back to the time when I was in my early 20s. That's when I first joined the League. And it was back in the 70s. And the Equal Rights Amendment was just passed from Congress, and it was being sent out to the states to be ratified. At the time, I was living in New York, and New York was getting set to ratify it. And so I joined the League of Women Voters. Actually, I formed my own chapter. I was president of it. And we spoke out at a lot of organizations in favor of the Equal Rights Amendment. And I realized how important education was, civic education. So I became very involved in voter education, civic education. Then I had children, then I went back to school, then I had a career. And so the League kind of took a back step in my life. But when I moved here, I joined the League, and the Charleston League is a wonderful, very active league. We have over 200 members here, and we cover Charleston, Dorchester, and Berkeley counties. And I find that my work as director of voter services is very helpful for me because, again, I get to meet people like you. I get to speak to a lot of organizations and help them understand the importance of voting. And so the League has always satisfied my need for civic engagement. And by the way, we have student members, and it doesn't cost anything to be a student member. And if you're interested, you can go to our website, lwvcharleston.org, and click the join button, and it will tell you how to be a student member.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Amelia.
Thanks, Amelia. In person. All right, Kieran, come on up, please. This is one of our intermediate school students. His name is Kieran. Oh, he's
Hi.
way up.
I see you. You're coming to the screen. Hi, Kieran.
Hello, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Jason, when it had the map of all the states and it had like green, blue, half of Michigan was one color and the other half was a different.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Good for you to notice that. I'm going to go back to that and find out why, and I'll get that answer to you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We got a smart crew on hand today, Jen.
I love it. Lots of details. Okay. He wasn't sleeping. Good.
All right, our next question is virtual. We're gonna go with Pi, please.
Whoop, you have to unmute. Unmute.
Oh, sorry, I thought I hit it.
Okay. Hi.
Hi. What do you think about mail-in voting and the obstruction of USPS operations, especially with the fear of voters' votes not being counted?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we get asked that a lot. Okay. In South Carolina, we don't have mail-in voting. We have absentee voting, okay? There's no difference except that it requires that the voter request an application for an absentee ballot as opposed to mail-in voting, which is where your ballot is sent to everybody. That's the only difference. But I believe, because I work very closely with the Board of Elections in the 3 counties, we have very conscientious workers at the Board of Elections. And there are ways to, I don't want to say circumvent the post office, but make it easier so that you can get your absentee ballot in on time. First thing you want to do is apply now for your absentee ballot. Now, I know the legislation hasn't been passed yet, but we're pretty sure that the legislators are going to pass no excuse absentee voting in September. Right now, you have to fill in one of the 16 or 17 excuses that are on the ballot, but most people can do that. You can say you're working, you're going to be out of town, you're taking care of a sick person. I mean, the categories are very broad. However, if you want to wait until the legislature passes legislation, no excuse voting, you can wait until September and then you can apply. You can apply online. One of the students at the College of Charleston showed me how to do it really easily. You just print out your application, fill it out, take a picture with your phone, and then forward it, email it back to the Board of Elections. So you can skip over that first mailing experience. Your ballot will be sent out. Unfortunately, it doesn't come until the second week in October, but every one of our boards of elections has a tracking system. So you can go on their website and you can track where your ballot is. And then as soon as your ballot comes, you fill it out, you don't have to mail it back. There will be drop boxes in all 3 counties where you can drop your ballot off. Downtown, it will be at the public library. It will also be at Seacoast Church here in Mount Pleasant. So you don't have to use the mail if you don't want to. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good.
Jen, before we get another person here, I want to pipe in. That's a reminder of how important the league is, because there is an incredible amount of chit chat and talk and even rumor mongering and misinformation about what's going on in a municipality or a county or a state or the country. And
Right.
to know that the league is paying attention and the league's an arbiter of accurate information, it's really critical.
Yeah, there is a lot of misinformation out there. And You know what, in some vulnerable communities in our area, so African American communities, Latinx communities, they are particularly worried about suppression of voting. And I just want to assure everyone that you have the right to vote. If you go to vote in person, and you don't have the correct identification, you can vote with a provisional ballot. So I don't want anyone to be turned away at the polls.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the news won't typically share something until it's fact. So they'll wait until September, the fact, to say that there will be no excuse absentee bowling. And then you can't see that on the government websites. So this is, again, the league is letting you know about something that they're working on that's
Right.
sort of in the hopper.
My phone is going to die, so I can't talk very
About
much.
And yeah, you just need to be mindful of that. All right, so I'm looking for another in-person speaker. Kessler, come on up. All right, Kessler's making her way up here.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Hang on, I muted you. Hang on. Joan, I accidentally muted you while I was sort of clearing out the participants.
Okay.
All right, well, did you hear her question?
I didn't ask.
I didn't ask her a question, sorry.
There you go.
I was just wondering, this is one of the first times in American history we've had kind of a doubt about whether our elections will be valid and whether our vote will be counted. So what do you think the ramifications of this will be on going forward for the league and just in general for people who are doubting that their vote will be counted, that it matters? Will this like roll back all the work we've done to get people registered?
Well, I hope not. And that's a great question because you're bringing up a question that a lot of people are afraid of. We're doing our very best. I mean, this is like a perfect storm. It's you know, the virus is not helping us to get the word out. Obviously, we would be talking in person. I would be having in-person voter registration drives. I would be talking to a lot more about the safety of voting. But the misinformation that's in the news is a serious issue. And we're doing our best to get the word out there. All I can say is that we have to trust our institutions. We have to trust our democracy. We have to recognize that our vote counts and that everyone does have a right to vote. I don't want to be a Pollyanna. I know that there are some places that are going to work very hard to keep people from voting. But I think that we all need to be, you know, those foot soldiers again, just like we talked about in the presentation. Those women who said, our vote counts. We're going to power the vote. And so each one of us has to do whatever it is we can do to get our parents out to vote, our older siblings out to vote, vote yourself, you know, get the correct information. If you have a question, you should certainly contact the League of Women Voters because we just want you to vote. We want to save our democracy and make sure that everyone has the right to vote. I don't know if I can give you a better answer than that because who knows what's going to happen on election day. We want a great turnout.
Thank you, Jen. It's a reminder that she's sharing this information. And so the students here, you now know more than 99% of adults in the Low Country about the way things are headed. And that's a great feeling. You're entrusted with that information. So I hope that you will then share this with your family and your neighbors safely as you can during this pandemic. The resources are on the prep that you had earlier this week and on the Moodle page, the League of Women Voters, you know, the Vote 411. It's all right there. And so it's a great feeling to be young and know that you know more than your parents or the adults in the area about it. So please don't hold this information tight.
No.
Share it. Yeah. So now we're going to another online speaker. Is there someone next in the queue? I don't think I have another online question. Is there another someone remotely?
I see Grady has his hand up.
Yep, Grady, let's go for it.
Hi, thank you for joining us today and talking about this.
Thank you, Grady.
I was wondering, do you believe that women today are treated equally and have all the rights that they should have?
That's a great question, and it's a question we answer a lot when we advocate for the Equal Rights Amendment, because a lot of people say, well, women, I'm a woman, I came up through the system, and I was treated fairly in business, and in fact, the most discrimination right now, the reason why we need an Equal Rights Amendment, I'll just say that, is because women are not in the Constitution. Even when issues come up before the Supreme Court with domestic abuse or with equal pay, there are no constitutional rights that women have. There are state laws, and so it depends on what state you live in, but and there are also presidential proclamations, which will change with every person who's in office. So there isn't a complete coverage of women's rights when it comes to the Constitution. That's why we need the Equal Rights Amendment.
Thank you, Grady. Okay, looking for another in-person question. All right, James, you want to come on up? All right, this is James. He's coming.
Thank you for coming.
A little bit louder.
Hi, James.
The biggest misconception about the struggle for the 19th Amendment is?
Okay, the biggest misconception about, what was that?
The struggle for the 19th Amendment.
About the struggle for the 19th Amendment. Well, a lot of people say that women were given the right to vote. And when you look at the history of the 19th Amendment, you realize they weren't given the right to vote. It wasn't something that people sat down one day and said, you know what, women have been left out of the Constitution when it comes to voting, and so let's write them in. No, this was a long 150-year struggle of speaking out, writing letters, protesting, civil disobedience to convince the people in power that women deserve to be protected by the Constitution with the right to vote.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, looking back online again. Someone raised their hand. Let's see if we can see it. Mina, were you going to ask a question, or was that Lila? All right, I got Liam. Liam, you're up. Mina, did you have a question?
Oh yeah, I did.
All right, so Liam, I'm gonna shift to Mina and then come back. I thought I saw her first. All right, Mina.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
Oh,
I was just wondering why the League of Women Voters started caring about these other issues such as healthcare reform, the environment, census, and immigration.
Yes, excellent question. And we do. We have study groups, we have positions. So first of all, you need to know that we have a National League of Women Voters, and we have policy positions on immigration, on healthcare, reproductive rights, the environment, social justice issues. These are issues that are very important to the League of Women Voters on the national level and on the state level. The local level, we also have study groups in Charleston on the environment, and where we look at flooding issues, we look at social justice issues, the criminal justice system in Charleston as well. So yes, we definitely do study those as well. But since I'm director of voter services, I'm kind of partial to making sure people get to vote.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Mina.
Thanks, Mina. Okay, going back to another in-person, then we'll come back to Liam. All right, you want to ask on Fran? This is Fran. She's coming up right now.
Okay.
Hello.
Just be a little louder.
Hi.
Hi, Fran.
My mother works in pediatric nephrology and in the medical field, and she claims that it's one of the most sexist environments that a woman can work in due to the prominently male basis of doctors, and I just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Okay, I lost you at the end of your question. She works in the healthcare field, which is mostly male dominated. And what was your question at the end?
I just want to know how you feel about the current imbalance in the medical field at the moment.
Yeah, so it's a big question. I mean, part of it is cultural. Part of it is, do we help young women like yourselves see themselves as medical professionals? And that's a cultural thing. I think it's wonderful that your mother works in the medical field so that you can see that. She's a role model for you. And so that's what we need. We need more women to go to medical school and enter the medical profession. But then once there, and I think this was true a couple of years ago in the Post and Courier, we found that women in the medical field were not paid the same as men in the medical field for the same position. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes, my mother is a professor in the medical field. She had to work for years to get to that position.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, this goes back to Grady's question about do women have equal, I believe women have equal rights. There are still areas of discrimination in the workplace. And Fran is pointing one such field out to us. Although women have made great strides, it's recent and it's not equal economically as well. Now, what can women do about that? There are laws that you can, where you can go and you can advocate for equal pay. But it's very, very difficult to prove that without a constitutional right. So, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Fran.
Thanks, Fran, for that. Now we're, Liam, thanks for being patient, and you're up now.
Hi, Liam.
Hi, thank you for coming. I was wondering what your thoughts are on how many more males there are in the presidential area of government, and how long do you think it will take for that to change, and what effect will it have on the other branches of government?
So you're asking me about the balance between male and female. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good question. I mean, we're making great strides. I think women in 2018, the election 2018 at the state level voted more women into office than ever before. And so women are running for office. And I think it's great that we have a woman on the vice presidential ticket this year. There is a statistic somewhere, and I don't know whose statistic it is, but they feel that anything more than a 30% balance at the state level. So legislation should be like, women should have at least a 30% or 35% representation on the state level in order for there to be some kind of a balance. And we certainly don't have that here in South Carolina. But there are a lot of women who are running for the legislature in South Carolina, which is good. So all we can do is, again, as I said to Fran, it's a cultural thing. I think women have to see themselves in places of power, and we need to raise our daughters and our sons to see themselves as, now, I want you to know, I don't have daughters, I have sons. So I am not prejudiced against boys. I think boys have wonderful talents, but they do, they are kind of part of the, the white male system. So we need to also recognize women have the power as well. I don't know if that answers your question, Miriam.
It did, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, looking for another in-person question in this room. Come on, Suzette.
By the way, I am so excited to celebrate Women's Equality Day with students. They are just wonderful.
Oh, good. We're so glad. Here comes Suzette. She's one of our sixth graders.
I'm sorry, her name is Suzette?
Yeah, Suzette. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Suzette.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I believe I heard you say that women don't have very many rights that are in the Constitution. Do you have any goals to help women gain as many rights as men, or to get some women's rights into the Constitution?
No, there isn't. So there is a pro-quo kind of thing. Right now, the only rights that are actually written into the Constitution is the right to vote. What the Equal Rights Amendment will do is to say that women cannot be that you cannot discriminate against a person because of their sex. It's not that we want to have X amount of rights, but we want to say that you cannot discriminate against anybody, men or women, on account of sex. And a wonderful movie, if you haven't seen it, about Ruth Bader Ginsburg is called On the Basis of Sex. And she won her first court case defending a man who was denied the rights, or he was denied insurance costs to take care of his mother because he was a man. So we don't want any discrimination on the basis of sex. I think I know it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it's not like there's a list of rights. It's just that no one should be discriminated against on the basis of sex.
Yeah. Thanks, Suzette.
Thank
you. Anyone online have a question still? We've got about 10 minutes or so left. And looking here in person.
Let me just point out, I know that you just purchased these 2 books.
Yeah, we're getting them today.
Wonderful. So each of these books, well, not this one. This is the adult version. There is a young adult version of the Woman's Hour, which tells the story of how the 19th Amendment was ratified. And it's a great follow-up to the things we were talking about today. So the question was, what about the myths about the 19th Amendment, that the whole world would fall apart, some people thought. So that's in that book. And then this is also for young people, Votes for Women, American Suffragists and the Battle for the Ballot. And it's it covers a little bit more than just Tennessee voting for the 19th Amendment. It's really the whole history and all of the suffragists. So if you want to read a little bit more, you're very lucky to have these 2 books at your school.
Thanks. Yes, we've got 3 copies of each. So once we get them in, you're welcome to catch up with me, just like last week with Bakari Sellers being here, sharing his memoir with you. All right, we're doing last call for speeches. Y'all have done a really great job. It's been very thorough. Oh, we've got Violet here on campus. She's one of our 8th graders. She's coming over now.
Hi.
Hi, Violet.
For coming. It's so special. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
So my question, do you feel the United States of America has yet to see a female elected president, partly because of the disproportionate advantage given to white women after the 19th Amendment?
Wait a minute. So we haven't had a woman president because of the 19th Amendment?
The disproportionate advantage given to white women after the 19th Amendment.
Okay. I think that we haven't had a woman president, but we're going to be very close to one, I think, for a variety of reasons, not because of the 19th Amendment. You're right. A lot of women did not vote for Hillary Clinton. And you know what? Not all women are in favor of women's rights. They weren't in 1920. They felt that the protections for women would be erased if they got the right to vote. They also felt that women belonged in the home. They didn't belong making decisions about politics and getting their minds sullied with thinking about politics. So not all women support women candidates. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Thank you
so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, Violet.
I do want to say, though, that the strongest voting bloc are Black women voters.
You want to explain that? Or
So the voting bloc in 2018 that voted in a large number of women, Black and white, were Black women who turned out to vote. Now, you can think of the reasons why, but people are saying even in this coming presidential election that Black women are going to be the people who turn out the vote. I think because they value the vote, because they didn't have it, and also because they understand how precious it is. It can be taken away very easily, as John Lewis reminded us. So just keep that in mind. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
now we're tracking a lot of good conversations and information. All right, anyone else online want to raise their hand and get in? We got a little bit less than 10 minutes, or I'll take in-person people as well too. Joan, you've been very generous. Jack Wheeler, come on down. This is one of our high school students.
Okay.
His name is Jack. Yep, he's coming over.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Jack.
My question is, for people maybe misinformed by the League of Women Voters, they'd probably think that, well, obviously it's been a century since you have been given the right to vote. Maybe people would question, what are you still fighting for? What would you respond to that?
Okay, good question. Good question. The League is all about education, voter education. So as we talked about before, the misinformation, there's a lot of misinformation about voting. Obviously, we were successful in getting the vote, but then we quickly realized that people needed to be educated. They needed to know who's on the ballot, how to vote, all of the different rules and regulations depending upon where you live. A photo ID, where's your polling place? These are all things that people take for granted. We call it making a plan to vote. And also, people would be surprised to know that the low voter turnout is really, it's something I don't understand. But 3 out of 5 people, only 3 out of 5 people vote. So that's a big portion of our population that doesn't vote. And getting those people to think about the importance of their vote is part of what we do. So there's still a lot of work to do.
That was a really interesting question because it made me think of how society is adapted. There's a hardware store that's been around in America for, I don't know, probably 100 years, Ace Hardware.
Uh-huh.
And their jingle forever was, Ace is the place with the helpful hardware man. And only in the past anyone heard this? 5 or 6 years have they changed it. Anyone know how it goes now? Andrew? Yeah, Ace is the place with the helpful hardware folks. So sometimes it's just, these pauses and thinking about it, because you also mentioned the kids could join the league. Do you have to be a woman to join? Could only
No. In fact, we have men who are members.
There you go. Anyone in this room could join the League of Women Voters.
Yeah, absolutely. We opened it up to men back in the 70s, and we've got some very active men who work with the league. Yep, and young men. It would be wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saving the last 5 minutes for us to talk about you mentioned the polling working and how you were polled.
Yeah. So,
but I want to see if there's one more question before we hit that.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyone else? Is Meredith? Yeah. Okay. This is Meredith. She's one of our 6th graders. She's coming up now. Thanks, Cadence, for that.
Hi, Meredith.
Hi. When you say there's 3 out of 5 people who do, only 3 out of 5 people who vote, are those 5 people the people who actually are eligible to vote? Like,
Yes. Yeah, eligible. Yeah. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? That you take the time to register to vote, and then when election day comes, you say, oh, there's a lot of reasons why people don't vote. I mean, they don't vote because they don't know what's on the ballot, they don't want to make a mistake, or they think their vote doesn't count, or they might be, they might have lots of care at home. They can't get to the polls. So, yeah, so that's what we work on, getting everybody who's eligible to vote to actually vote.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, Meredith, that's a great question before we segue into poll workers, because I look over here, I see Will, I see Noah, I see all sorts of students who've been here a long time. I'm excited about these presidential election years because Joan knows this too. This is where you get the 60% turnout. Last for town elections, it was like 15 to 20%.
Exactly.
So people don't vote. It's not a constant rate, Meredith. It is an up and down. And it's also really weird because probably those local officials probably have the biggest impact on your life, and people.
So true.
League wants you all to be voting all the time. So you'll get to see all sorts of elections here every year, and you'll see how different it is.
And I just want to add that people always forget school board elections. And I mean, the school board is what affects every one of us. And unfortunately, they're always at the bottom of the ballot. And by the time you get to the bottom, and they're nonpartisan. So if you're voting a strict party line, when you get to those school board members, you don't know. You do need to do your homework ahead of time before you go to the polls.
Yes, great. So we have a couple minutes left. Joan and I were pre-talking yesterday, and she shared that story about her husband and how she can't work. And so she's sharing with you the ramifications if a lot of the people who take it as an incredible civic pride and civic duty of theirs is to man precincts for like a long time. I mean, like
a long time.
Yeah, you have some of the same crews working at some of the same precincts over and over and over again. And so what she's saying is the same thing the school is doing. Joan, they know here, you've been here, that if something happened to me or a lot of the teachers got sick, what we would do is consolidate. We would consolidate you in the gym or the sanctuary, places that hold several hundred people where a fewer number of teachers can watch you. So this might happen with elections. If they don't have as many workers, they'll consolidate the machines down to bigger spaces, like a gym or something like that. But it will be less convenient than before, where you might have to drive farther, wait longer, something like that. So teenagers, 16 and older, you get paid $130, Jen?
About $150. Yeah.
$150 for the day. It's a 13-hour day. It's like 6 in the morning till, well, it might be later than 7.
It might be later than 7
Yeah.
by the time everybody finishes voting, right?
Yep. There's a little bit of training involved, but I know I told Joan, I think we have 3 or 4 people who might be interested, but I'd love to see if the high school students here and Ms. Stone, I'm talking to our upper school director, and you middle schoolers, you know, we could become a hub of creating a lot of energy and get
That'd be great.
trained and perform an incredible service in the Low Country of making sure as many as possible precincts.
Wonderful. That would be great.
Prep them here, and then we could pass them off to the county for their formal training. You know, let them know that. So it would be great. It would be
Right.
great.
So you do need, so the way to do that is to go on to the Charleston Board of Elections website, and I don't have that in front of me right now, but you can, you know how to Google that. And right on their first page, they have become a poll worker. So you can just click on that, and it will walk you through the steps of applying for, actually they call it election worker, but you can certainly do that online real easily. There will be online training, and I understand you can do that probably at school. And then you will have to spend some time in their office to get familiar with the machines. The big difference between June and now is that in Charleston, if you can't be there the whole day from like 6 in the morning until 8 at night, you can split your shift. And they don't make that known, but if you and a friend want to split the day, that's possible. And you should ask about that, in just in case you can't spend the whole day. Also, I wasn't able to, I did work last year and for the presidential primary, but I did not work in June, and they did have to close polling places. And what happens is that you have to wait online a lot longer. It makes it more difficult for people to vote. There will be more safety precautions taken in November than they had in June. They really didn't have a lot of shields or equipment that helped you help protect yourself, but there will be this time. So your parents should be more comfortable with that if you want to do that.
That's a great moment to end with, because also some people don't pay attention to the election till that morning. And if a poll has been closed, they don't know.
Right.
They'll do their poll, they'll see that it's closed, and then they're done. So in a weird way, that's a form of voter suppression, because it's really hard to reach people. So we do what we can to stop that.
So tell your parents to use Vote 411, and they can find their voting precinct, even if it's closed. So we keep it up to date. We follow what the Board of Elections is doing, and you will get accurate information on Vote 411 about where your polling place is. Also, if you don't do that and you show up at your polling place, there will be a sign that sends you to the correct polling place.
Yeah. Who knew how great all this would be? Because the pandemic has created a positive piece, which is engagement and paying attention to civics. So
exactly. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing.
Joan, it's a pleasure. We hope to see you soon, and I think we're going to have someone from the league talk in a couple weeks with us, because there's lots of stuff, like Mina was saying, that the league does and we want to hear about.
Wonderful. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Have fun at the library tonight.
Bye.
Yeah. All right, bye. All right, we're all going to stay on this Zoom while Joan departs. We are going to I'm going to leave this Zoom up. You can turn off your video and audio. We're all taking a 10-minute break, right? We've just been sitting for a little bit. That's what it says, a break till 1:40. So people here, that's a stretch break. You can stay in the area of your chair. You can go to the bathroom in small groups, and then we're going to pick this up and have a discussion. Got it, home people? Chill for 10.